Hey guys, we are back. It's Colin Stevens, and I'm joined here with Nick Izzo today. We're talking player development, and that's something that I have been dialed into for the past 10 to 12 years. So, we're actually gonna give Nick Izzo the platform here, and let him pick my brain here for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the fact that we're getting into the spring,
Yep.
and so our next main focus is really pre-draft. Really, the question that I would have, and I think could bring people a lot of value, is sort of what your process is when we are first getting a guy, or even maybe in the couple weeks leading up to it, and kind of that process, that player development process, kind of starting from the jump.
Yeah.
Like what you're kind of like looking for, maybe how you kind of pick what your emphasis is, all that kind of process.
Yeah. So when we're looking at a player that is going to be coming in, really it's like, all right, what is their skill set? What can they do? What's their size? What is their ability? What are their capabilities, right? And then honestly, one of the first things that comes to mind is, who do they play like? Right. And so I look at an NBA player of who they play like, who they move like, and then we start to kind of work into, okay, they've been playing college, right? Or they've been playing in Europe, or they've been playing wherever they've been playing. And getting ready for the draft, it's really now, how does an NBA team see them? What is it? What is the value that they bring to an NBA team? Because some guys, they can in college they average a double, or they everything that's in college or in the European game is not always translatable to the NBA. And so what we have to do is we have to really lock into one or two things how they bring value to an NBA team. And I'm specifically talking from a skill development side of things, right? Because the reality is, some of these guys need to shed some weight. They need to shed some weight so that they can keep up with the NBA game, the pace of the game, and the spacing and everything that's different than the college game. So, that's a whole other thing for PC. But as we start looking at a guy, it's okay, what can he do, and how does that translate to the NBA, and how do we need to sharpen that and get his mind ready for that sort of competition?
Right. Now, this from the player development side, I kind of wonder sometimes if it's better to look at a guy and say he's really elite at this. Mm-hmm. Maybe he's just a really elite shooter, or he's very quick. And like, would you then build into that strength? Would you spend the majority of the time just building into that one strength? Or do you try to kind of give him something else to complement that, like add sort of a second weapon? Or is it kind of, let's just go all in on this strength and then kind of see where we go from there?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we can make a mistake as trainers and player development guys is trying to do too much with players, is trying to add too much to their game. Right. And so I do think it is important that you just, look, this guy's he was a great shooter in college or wherever he's coming from, mm-hmm. but to extend to the NBA range and to be able to shoot those while you're tired, while you've just been defending on the other end, and still shoot it with the same sort of consistency, that's something that we would look to work into. But the reality is most, there's very rare shooters in the game now that also can't put it on the deck. So ball handling, and it's really, guys are becoming more versatile over the past 10 years, and being able to dribble, pass, and shoot. Everybody being able to do that. Yeah. You don't see as much, of an inside post up game as much. Guys still get paint touches, but typically it's off the dribble or off the cut, not as much as feeding the post. And so with that, ball handling is something that we're going to work on everybody with.
Right.
But look, for a big guy that's not going to handle the ball a lot, we'll work on a couple dribbles and an outlet pass, or different things that we work on with a guard who's going to handle the ball all the time. So it really comes down to how does it translate to the NBA game?
Right.
The reality is that offensively, all of these guys have to be able to do one or two things really well. Mm. But for any of them, it doesn't matter if they can't defend their position. right? So if they can
Right.
shoot it at an incredible clip, but they cannot defend,
Right.
like it's just there's too many guys that can shoot it well enough and can defend and can play out of ball screens and can do that,
Yeah.
right? And so there's too many guys that have a higher skill set or more versatile skill set that can also defend.
Right.
And so when you look at it that way, like guys have to be able to get strong enough. You know, a lot of these guys coming out, they're younger, right? And so they've got to be able to put on some weight and make sure that it's good weight that they're putting on. They've got to be able to defend at the other end. So I mean, that's a piece that we'll certainly lock into,
Right.
you know, coming this spring too.
Now on the defensive end's a little different, right? In terms of how you sort of are keeping them sharp on that end compared to the offensive end. I think for most people you see in the training world, offense. How have you found, or I guess what's the best way to work defensively during that sort of player development piece, whether it's just, you know, for a coach who might be listening who says, you know, during practice we like to break down a little bit, or, you know, moving forward to like the guys that we train, like what's the most efficient way to do that?
I think honestly is, you know, 1-on-1, 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 settings and have them guard multiple different positions, different guys, different skill sets, and see where their strengths and weaknesses are, you know, because if you put, you know, let's say we've got somebody that's coming in who's a 6'6", you know, wing, right? But they played because of what their team needed in college. They played a little bit more on the inside, so they guarded on the inside well. But what it turns out is they actually struggle guarding a two guard, or they struggle guarding a perimeter player all the time because they've been used to guarding somebody on the inside a little bit more. And so I think it's a scenario where you put them against guys that they have to be able to guard, right? And against multiple positions, because in the NBA they switch so much now, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you've got to be able to guard 2, 3, 4 positions, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And those guys are super valuable.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
So in practical settings, I would say, you know, like 2-on-2, 3-on-3 scenarios, switch a lot of stuff and have them have to guard different positions.
Yeah. Now, I'm also kind of interested with sort of the psychology of the players when it comes to player development. And I guess the question that comes to mind is, how often do you think they have the same vision on what they should be working on that the trainer does? Like, how often does that mesh, I guess, in a sense?
Yeah, it's interesting because you also have to develop a relationship of trust before somebody starts allowing you to like work on their game. Not just like work out, because there's a difference in development and working out.
Yeah.
Like we can just go get a sweat in and I didn't make you any better. Right.
Of course.
But we worked out.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to develop a relationship to where if you start to tweak somebody's shot a little bit, they're trusting you and they'll go all the way through with that. Because I've certainly worked with players that have needed to work on their shot, but they want to do it their own way. They don't want to listen to what I have to say.
Yep.
Even though I show them film, I show them everything of which needs to be changed, right? And so it's really more so of their buy-in, but you also don't want a guy that comes in and says, oh, I need to work on everything. You know, I think you get those guys that are like, I know I'm good, but I know I can get better. Those are the special ones.
Yeah. That
right.
makes sense.
And they want to work and they want to get the details of it and they want to just they want to get it perfect.
Yeah, it's that self-awareness, like in a lot of things. I guess it's sort of.
But it's interesting, like because sometimes there's players that are really frustrating to work with because they don't want to do anything that makes them look bad or uncomfortable.
Right.
Because the reality is, it's like training is not a performance. Like and that it in their mind it could be, because every time they're on the court is almost a performance. There's so many cameras. There's so many things that get
hard to turn that off, right?
Get posted on social media, whether how guys are working out, this and that. Like that's irrelevant. Like if you're willing to make some mistakes in training, then you can get better.
Yeah.
But if you're just gonna stay in the same comfort zone and do everything that you've always been doing, you won't get better. Like you might get in better shape, but your skill set won't improve.
Right. That makes sense. I think if like the interesting part is that we're able to kind of work with a variety of guys. And I think the one thing that I've always kind of wondered, I guess it's the most practical, is what are the skills that players should be working on from like the youngest age that translate the best? I think there's a lot a lot of people that are sometimes misguided in that,
Yeah.
and maybe it's more simple than people kind of perceive it. But yeah, I think that would be able to bring people some value is like what, my kid's 9.
Right.
Like what's,
Well, one of the worst things that can happen is for a 9-year-old is to see what James Harden just did. And then for some trainer to be like, oh my gosh, did you see that double step back and the everything that, James Harden is a physical animal, right?
Yes,
and so 9-year-olds are not going to be able to do what he is doing. Now, look, there are some 9-year-olds that are super. They've been working at it. Like they can handle the ball. Their footwork is good, and so like I think it's just up to the trainer to see like, hey, how do I keep challenging this kid? I think it's really just as it's a development for anything. Like if you look at like how a child develops, they have to have big chunks of things where it's easier for them to consume. You work on the basics, and once they get the basics, some kids don't want to go beyond the basics, but they want the really cool highlights. And then you've got some kids that like the basics and all right, give me something else to master, and then give me something else to master. And then as you get to high school and you get to college and the players keep going, they keep getting better. Right. Then it becomes more detailed because the details matter more the more elite players get. So yes. I still think for youth basketball, it's really mastering fundamentals and not so much doing things that pros are doing.
Yeah.
The reason that James Harden shoots some of those shots, the reason that Jason Tatum is as good as he is, and the way that they create shots is because they have to be able to create shots differently because of the way that they're defended. Most kids are not defended like that.
Right.
So I think if the more basic that you keep it, as the kids are younger, develop a love for the game, let them play pick up and one-on-one and all that stuff. Let them play without supervision. Just let them hoop, let them develop a love for the game, and then as they get older, they get into middle school, they get into high school, and they really start to establish themselves as a player that's better than other players.
Right.
And then they start to look to get an edge. That's when the weight room comes in. That's when the, 500 shots a day comes in. That's when the, that's right. But I think, for younger players, it's mastering the fundamentals and having fun, like playing ball. Like it's not, these parents are nuts at these AAU tournaments and stuff of just demanding that their teams win, their the 4th grade championship. And like, my kid has to have a double-double, and like the kid doesn't even know what a double-double is, and like, so it's a wacky world, but I think keeping it fun is massive.
Yeah, it's interesting as you were saying that. I'm thinking like, I guess at what point when you're working with a player, are you towing that fine line in a sense between encouragement but then also trying to be realistic with them? I think it's kind of, you don't want to create a fake environment for the player in a sense, but I think that sort of I guess the balance between the two of like, instilling some confidence in them yet keeping things realistic. Yeah. How do you kind of work on that balance? It's probably easier with the younger players, I would guess. You can be a little more direct with them. Like they're probably their strengths and weaknesses are a little more apparent, I guess.
I think for the higher level guys, it's you got to see where they are mentally. Some of the guys are critical enough of themselves that they're looking to do things better, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't have to like just like they're going super hard, and you don't have to demand effort from them, and they're looking to do things right, and they want to get it as clean and as detailed as they can. And then you've got some guys that doubt themselves a little bit, and they'll go hard, but you've got to push them to believe in themselves more. That's another thing is I don't think you can control the belief that somebody has in themselves.
Yeah.
I think that comes from
inside
themselves and the confidence that they've built over time. But I think when it comes to the mental side of things, when you're working it out, is also like is helping them understand that it's a process. And if you start to break down their skill set a little bit and work on something and really you know, add to their game or tweak something that really has to be tweaked for them to be really good at the next level, they have to buy in, and it has to be a process. And through that, just like any other relationship, you know, the mentor, the trainer, the one who's leading it has to be very aware of the mental state of the, you know, of who you're working with, so you can understand, like, not like they need to be pushed, they need to be pushed, they need to be pushed. But then it's also like, well, also when do they need to be, you know, when do they need to be encouraged and you know, understanding that this is a process.
Yeah, definitely. Now I think another thing that kind of comes to mind, I guess, is how do you fit the player development piece in sort of a team situation, right? Like, I'm thinking of, you know, if you're a high school coach and you're listening to this and you're thinking, I value player development a lot, but how do I practically get that in, especially during the season? Like, I would just be curious what, like, your, I guess, tip would be on that, how it kind of comes together.
Yeah, and I think, you know, high school and college are very similar, where they still practice, you know, several times a week. You know, like, you know, some of the pro teams get into it now, and the practice is because they play so many games, is not as intense, or it's not as it's probably more you know, individual based, or, you know, just keeping guys sharp and running through some stuff. But when it comes to continuing, like, teams that are still working on team stuff to get better, like, I think it's you take, you know, 30 minutes at the beginning of practice, and no matter what, it's player development stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and I just talked to a friend of mine who's at a JUCO, and he's been in player development for the past several years, and you know, he felt really good because he just talked to, you know, he's finally broken through to his head coach that player development is a big deal, and since they've put time into it, like, they've seen them shoot it better, they've seen them score it better, they're passing the ball better, like, because they're spending time doing it. So I think if you can carve out 30 minutes, and you you just have to make it a priority, and you have to realize that is an important part of it. And then, you know, break down, you know, if you have guards and bigs, you can break them down that way, or you know, I like for everybody to be able to dribble, pass, and shoot, so we have everybody do something similar to that, and we incorporate that way. But that's certainly a challenge, but if you make it a priority, it will help your team.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. And then when, I guess, kind of an insight into the pro level with all those teams. So all those teams have player development guys, like player development coaches. How much more intensive is that piece at that level? Like, I know some of those staffs carry quite a few of those type of guys. Yeah. Is that they skew way more to that, correctly? Like, it's very, especially like you said, this time of year, it's very, like, heavily player development based, right?
Yeah, and they'll spend time with it, and, you know, like, San Antonio has done, they're renowned for being player development guys, right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Everybody who's come through there has just really, really improved. A couple guys I'm thinking of are Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard. What he did with his game. So, that's where they're going to spend more of their time, because you've got those. What you do to their bodies is so important. Like, they spend so much time in recovery because they play so many games, and they have back-to-back games, so it's not time for, like, hard team practices. So they'll get shots in, and they'll stay sharp. But then also it is a lot of film breakdown, and is understanding, you know, balance or technique or whatever it is that they're working on. But they'll spend plenty of time developing individual players.
Yeah, I wonder, like,
throughout the season.
I wonder how much better the game would be at the lower levels if they kind of took that lead.
Yeah.
Like, from the top, you know, like, if they kind of took that emphasis of
player development. I think the hard part of that is that you can go to all of those, I mean, most all of the guys in the NBA, and you can show them some film of a set that they ran poorly, and they can grasp. They grasp it, and they're like, oh, you know, or a defensive scheme that broke down, and they grasp it, and they, oh, okay. The hard part about youth basketball is that at any point, you teach them a scheme and it could take 2 hours for them to grasp it, or like you teach them, spacing on offense and 3 of the kids get it, but the other 2 don't get it. And so I think that's the challenge. But I think from an individual standpoint, way more time should be worked on in passing, dribbling, shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, like, passing with both hands, dribbling with both hands, obviously shooting with their dominant hand, but finishing with both hands. I think the earlier that you get that skill set and you understand, like, oh, I use both hands equally, if you build that foundation when they get into middle school, high school, like, you don't have to try to build something new.
Right.
Like, I think those, the first 10 years of a kid's life are huge. And
yeah.
So what you do in some of those years in terms of development and how they see getting better, I think is really big.
Yeah, no doubt. With that, it's interesting in the sense that I guess from such a young age, you can kind of morph that almost. Like, you can kind of help that kid to develop that work ethic, and then that will kind of carry them through the rest of the way. And it'll kind of, because a lot of it is them working on their own. I mean, right? It's a lot of that is, can the trainer give you something you can take with you the other however many hours
But that's
of the
the
week.
thing is, like, you go back 20, 30 years, like when I was coming through, like, trainers weren't a big deal.
Yeah,
like, not everybody was running a camp every Saturday morning. And so, I just had a lot of fun, like, practicing dribble moves and putting the ball in the basket. Like, that's what I did. So I would take, and it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to go work on my game. It's like, I'm kind of bored. I'm going to go play basketball outside in the backyard, or I'm going to go up to the park and see if I can get a run, or, like, I'm going to go do something. The hard part is that parents feel like they have to facilitate something for their kids.
Yeah.
And so the kid's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do it. And so you have a lot of kids that don't really want to be there. And then you have your select group that's like, yeah, I can't wait to get back. Okay. And I don't need a coach or a trainer or my parent. Like, I want to go play basketball.
Yeah, it's like that intrinsic motivation, right? It's like so big, but as is anything in life, right? I mean, any sort of development comes from the person wanting to develop.
Absolutely.
And I guess that has gotten a little bit misconstrued in this, at least in the culture of basketball.
Sure, and certainly on the youth side of things, right? But the reality is that the more elite the level gets, the more the cream rises to the top.
Right.
And those guys, that's why they make it.
Right.
We've seen a lot of super talented players never make it because they didn't have the mental fortitude to deal with the grind and to battle, because everything was so easy for them growing up, right?
For sure.
And then you've got some guys that are like, how are they in the league? Like, they almost don't even look like they're that good.
Right, that's true.
But in actuality, a team sees value in what they bring to the table, and a lot of that comes from just mental toughness. And so,
yeah, I mean, I think the last thing that I kind of want to get into is more for the trainers in the world, or the aspiring trainers, right? I think we kind of touched on that. There's a lot of trainers. There's a lot of good, bad, and in between. But I guess the question that I have would be more practical. Is like, for somebody that's looking to start out in training, what kind of are the, I guess, almost like the hacks in a sense that will help them kind of elevate what they're doing? And, a lot of guys, I think, want to work with the highest level player they possibly can, but they don't really know how to go about that piece, and they don't really know. I guess it's just some sort of like tips or a roadmap that you could give them to kind of, avoid a couple of the pitfalls that people kind of run into, along the way.
Yeah, I think why is a big deal, right? So why do you want to be a trainer? Do you want to be a trainer so you can take pictures with, all-stars and celebrities and say, hey, this is who I am? Because if that's the case, like, you may put that before actually developing players, right? So a trainer, you're actually training them to be a certain way. Right. So I think what is really important for trainers is that if you're demanding something out of a player, whether they're 10 years old or they're 20 and looking to go in the NBA, is you set an example by how hard you work, by the way that you speak, by what you do. Yeah. And so for trainers that are trying to get in the mix, I'd say just work hard. Like, work on your own game. The gimmicks and the tricks and, like, all the stuff that that may get a whole lot of Instagram hits, like, that doesn't mean that you're getting somebody better. And so as a trainer, I think if you can focus on actually helping players improve, I think that cream rises to the top too. And so when players improve and they get better and they see the results, and it comes back to some of the stuff that you've been doing with them. And also, trainers don't need to take credit for everything that good that happens with a player.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think it's important that, we all want to see get recognition for the work that we've done, right, in whatever field we're in. But I think it's really important too that players get credit for just working hard and being coachable and being teachable, right?
Yeah.
And so you see it all across the board in this field. But I think if guys are willing to, or guys or girls are willing to work hard and even develop their own game and help players get better and do a really good job, then at some point, if they stay with it, then they could have some breakthrough. But it's hard. It's hard. It's a super competitive business.
Yeah, certainly.
It's but Gary Vee is somebody that we have kind of plugged into,
Yeah,
right?
no doubt.
And he's like, well, you got to play the long game, right? You can't expect to get into an industry and in 2 years just have everything go your way.
Right.
I mean, it was what, 8 years before I started working with any guys that were professionals.
Yeah.
And so we've seen a massive climb in the past couple of years, but I just stayed with it. And so yeah, for anybody out there, just stay with it, whatever it is.
For sure.
You want to be good at it, stay with it.
No doubt. I think that's, and I think, for the audience, like, I think it really is that anything that they're trying to develop in their life, what is it that, you are trying to develop, and you need to just stay patient with, and sort of stay that course. And I think for some people that there's a lot of value in that, to be able to kind of assess that. So, hopefully, personal development of any kind is good,
No
and
doubt.
I think, I think that's kind of what we're touching on here.
No doubt. So we'll throw it back to you. What do you need to be more patient with? What do you need to stay with? I hope this could be a word, that last piece there could be a word that encourages you to stay with it, whether it's, like it's a career deal and it's something that you love. Understand that it's going to be difficult as you keep, pushing through. But there's a lot of people that quit because they don't have the stomach for it. So, yep, we appreciate you guys listening in. We'd love to hear from you. F2 Basketball, Nick Izzo, Colin Stevens. We're out of here.
We out.